Well, welcome back. It's another podcast with Ski Instructor Academy, and I am joined today with Tom Gellie, Tom, something like that, from bigpictureskiing.com. Tom, we've been trying to tie this up for about 2.5 years since the last one. I did promise to speak to you in November. I know. We're both too busy to talk.
Yeah.
But it's great to catch up. We had a little catch up last week, and it's been great to see, Tom, the development of bigpictureskiing.com over the last sort of, how long is it now? 48 months at least that you've been hammering hard at it.
Yes, it's probably about that.
Yeah, it's
been good.
Has it thrashed has it thrashed the optimism and positivity out of you yet? You were very positive when you started. No. You were very nice.
Yeah.
Are you still the nice Tom?
It hasn't. I think so. I mean, it was. You could say it was almost a little bit of a COVID baby, or I would just say it was born before that, but it was really set off because I couldn't do my other job. You know, treating people sort of with their all sorts of body aches and pains. Couldn't touch people. So I was like, right, give it a good go. And yeah, I've not looked back now, and it's sent me, I got to, be in Canada with my family for a month. That was amazing. As soon as we were allowed to leave Australia, leave the country, we were on an airplane, and Archie got to ski, and that was a huge highlight, just seeing his progression from not being able to make it around the bunny hill kind of 150 degree corner to skiing like a black run and spending like nearly a whole day skiing with us. And I think that's the best thing about skiing, is that you can actually do it as a family. Yeah. So many other sports you can spend the whole day doing that. I think that's just one of the most awesome things about skiing.
But how old is Archie now?
He's 4.5 now. So he was just, over 4 when he went there.
Just off camera there, I was asking you a question about the age, the sort of average age of your clientele and our clientele, basically, especially from the podcast, vlogcast analysis, that type of thing. And it's actually not 4.5, but it's more like 54.5 plus.
Exactly.
People who tend to, zoom into this are clearly, looking for something, and they want to revisit their youth. And I was pointing out to you the other day when we were speaking about the fact that I think as people get older, they sometimes forget the limitations that the body has, and that in skiing, from what I'm seeing, especially the way dynamic skiing is nowadays, certainly people being held in a lower position a lot of the time, stance being really important if you are looking for dynamic skiing. My concern is that maybe it's starting to challenge people my age and above to the point where coaches are missing some tricks. And from my experience within gymnastics, strength conditioning coaching, or weightlifting even, you would turn around and say, look, I'm not going to teach you how to make some sort of kipping movement in gymnastics unless you can lift your own body weight in a pull-up and lower yourself in a pull-up, 5 or 6 times at least in control. Same in a squat. Can you own the bottom position of a squat? And what I mean by owning the end range. And what I've seen, Tom, in the last 20 years particularly, is that people are isometrically far weaker than they used to be, and also eccentrically far weaker than they used to be. And I believe that's to do with a lot of information that's been bombarded at us to say, these positions are unsafe. So we used to do a lot of controlled isometrics in the 80s or 90s. Nowadays, isometrics lead to injury a lot of the time because people can easily overtrain it. But what I'm seeing is a situation where people can't even lower themselves down from a pull-up position anymore, or they can't make a negative, in effect, is what we would say in weights. I mean, maybe you don't see that progression, but are you aware of the clientele in your age, let's say when you're teaching, that some of them have problems getting into certain stance positions, and often it's the lowering, the absorbing that can be the issue?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we did the first sort of real online academy thing this season and coached about 60 people over the winter, never met any of them, just all online. And we spent a long time at the beginning of the season. All of December was around athletic stance and really getting detailed in it and making people at home, show us your basic kind of stance position, and 2 or 3 goes later, still getting feedback. No, adjust this, adjust that. And so I'd say, yes, I think there are a couple of facets. One, that scared into don't do this, it's going to be bad for your body. That could definitely be a contributing factor. But I still think a lot of the clientele I'm seeing do go to the gym. They maybe have a personal trainer, so they're realizing the importance there. But then there's like what I've seen, there's one sort of big difference with skiing. When you're in a ski boot, there's you hit a point that front of the ski boot does not move. And if you're used to moving a different way in the gym, you've got nothing to really reference against. Your squat is now kind of useless because you're trying to push on the tongue, and then now your balance is not through your feet. And so it's kind of the nuances of what is different in a ski stance versus the sort of squat position. And I would even argue that actually, some of the, like, not full range, but even deadlifted and sort of half range squats, they're more like what you use in skiing, because you don't overly flex your ankles a lot. When you do that, you tend to sort of, you're moving forward.
It's a hinge
You're not
movement.
really moving down. Yeah. You're kind of actually falling forward through the movement. You're not actually taking the weight straight down.
Mm. Which is
so
again,
they're just some of my thoughts.
The issue being that I think a lot of people, particularly as we get older, and particularly as well because the education then in the 70s, 80s was not as good around sport. No doubt about it. We were doing some crazy things. And as a result, people's knees are falling apart, their back, their hip, pick up these injuries over time. And I think from my side, I was due that knee replacement now at least 18 months ago, and I haven't had it because I've been able to work around it myself and realize that actually the things that the doctors, the specialists were telling me you never should do again in your life, do not do this, do not do that. I went against that and did the opposite and did that. Because by restricting range of movement in my knee to 120 degrees, let's say, and not going beyond that, not putting my knee over my toe, for example, that was the advice I'm given. Don't sit this way, don't, bend this way, was ludicrous. Because that would have led quickly to an operation, because, the synovial fluid, things that need to move around the joints aren't going to move if I'm not moving that joint. And it's interesting because you look back at some studies and you see, like in China, for example, they're a great believer in walking old people backwards. So I did a lot of walking on treadmills backwards, pushing things backwards, tibialis work that I'm told not to do. Now in skiing, that sort of stabbing sensation that a lot of people will get in their knee or restriction leads to them collapsing, higher up at the back, for example, rounding the lower back and making weird movements there. Because they don't want to have the knee go across the toe. They can literally feel that that's going to be, before the biggest thing that will hold a client back is pain. As soon as they know that pain's there somewhere, they're not going to get into that position, even if their ski instructor's telling them to get into that position. And I think, especially for the audience who are either, not just older people who've had knee surgeries, injuries, or hip surgeries, injuries, it's so important that you can own these positions in the dry land before you add speed element and think you can own them on the piste. That would be my preaching, if you like.
Yeah, and I've looked into that. This sort of, that's a growing movement now. More, there's that knees over toes guy, and he's helping a lot of people.
Patrick, isn't it? Ben Patrick.
Yeah, he's doing some really good stuff, and I think what it's teaching people is one. Let me rewind. I think what you can get out of that is when you know more about like what your range is, and then switching gears through switching levers, I think you will avoid strain in certain joints. So I think a lot of people think like the be all end all is like maximum ankle flexion range. So, like all problems come down to a tight ankle joint. Like your calves are tight, so you need to do calf stretches and work to change that angle. But the thing is, when joints run out of range of motion, like the point of that is to switch gears and shift to a different pivot point. So your ankle runs out of range of motion. People have problems when they keep trying to push beyond that range instead of you shift to like the balls of the feet. So the pivot point goes there. And so when you walk backwards and when you allow your knees to go over your toe, that's what's happening. You're shifting from the ankle joint being your pivot point to the balls of the feet being your pivot point, and you rock forward and things completely change in terms of loading, stress on the knee. Because, what you're telling your knee joint when you want to keep flexing the ankle is that femur is pushing the tibia further forward. And you think how the femur sits on top of the tibia, right? So that you're asking it to almost apply like a shearing type force in a way when you've hit this end range of the ankle, instead of take the resistance away and just tip forward. Like when I'm getting forward on skis, I'm not trying to do it through the ankle. I'm rocking forward on my toes and the balls of my feet, and I'm allowing the heel to come up.
I think that's why where this all came from, this shear force on the patella, which was discussed, I think, way back in, I'm guessing now, I remember about 1987, where a study came out saying, that the shear force on the patella is very high if the knees go over the toes. What they failed to recognize, and any study since then hasn't recognized, is that the knees always go over the toes in general movement and activity. This is the thing. If you walk backwards, you'll see your knees go over your toes. If you jump left to right, your knees go over your toes. If you land, your knees go over your toes. So it's important that we strengthen those elements. And in the type of dynamic skiing that I see online is, again, the knees go over the toes momentarily, but they do that. They rebound from that position. Now, again, my argument is if you've got a strength conditioning coach or a doctor who is telling you avoid those positions, then do not go on the piste and expect to ski like one of these guys. Okay, you're going to have to ski like an upright robot. That's fine. You'll still get down the slope and have a great day's activities. But don't in your dreams think that, I'm aiming for this. And this is another thing of realistic goals, if you like, when you're setting goals for people in their 60s, 70s plus. Every year on our ski instructor courses, we get people. This year, I think the oldest lady was about 68. And it's a lot different to teaching somebody at 68 to some 18-year-old whippersnapper. It's a complete different art. And an understanding of the differences in somebody's range of movement, owning a range of movement as well, is so important for a ski instructor. And, that brings me to the point where, again, for the audience, and I think you recognize that as well, the average ski instructor, and I shouldn't say the word average meaning average, I just mean general ski instructors, they haven't had an education in sports background. They haven't had an education in gymnastics, coaching, whatever, some specialist sport. They've just come in and echoed from a book given from an association who also haven't had that expertise as to, this is how you should ski. And unfortunately, people like us need to break that mold and say, hey, enough of this. We need to revisit it from the ground up over again, because there's so many fundamental problems in ski associations.
Yeah, and I mean, even got a story there. One of my favorite students, and you shouldn't have favorites, but
me,
Leanne.
It's definitely me.
Well, no, you won't be you won't let me be your coach, so you can't say that. You're a good friend, but anyway, back to Leanne. She's late 60s.
Good friend.
Late 60s. Right, but got her level 3 PSIA, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. It's been skiing a certain way for certain technique, certain amount of time. End of this season, what she said, I now ski better than I ever have. The knee pain I used to get, I don't get knee pain skiing. So that all went through changing technique, stance, boot setup, how she approached doing short turns, all these things. So to me, anecdotally, that was a fantastic kind of message and sort of some evidence saying that, you know, you work some fundamentals, you do things right, you learn how to move and be in touch with your body. All those like niggles and stuff just start disappearing, you know, and there was like never any don't do this, don't do that. It was like, this is a good athletic stance.
Yeah.
These turns, you're sort of losing it. This is what it feels like when you get it right. Here's some good drills for it. Go and practice.
And that's an important part to look at. You know, I keep saying I'm not my MRI scan. I'm not the person that shows that scan of my knee. I know what I feel. The doctor doesn't know what I feel. And for me, it's important that I take control myself. If I have an injury, you know, if there's an issue that I have, and don't get me wrong, there are people who need knee replacements. That's just life. Okay, eventually it can happen if you've abused your knees that long. And maybe mine needs replaced tomorrow. I don't know. But at the minute, I haven't had that knee replacement. I've rejected that because I feel that I can work around it and I can find a sensible way to still improve, still ski relatively dynamically, I would say, for my age. And as long as that continues and I keep looking that way, I would avoid having evasive operations, you know, things that are could create later problems, as much as there are a lot of success stories. But as I said to you recently, you know, for me, I think it's surprising actually in medical terms, don't get me wrong, doctors, you know, great people and stuff, but how little we actually know about the human body. I mean, let's face it, we still haven't cured cancer, you know, we still haven't found an answer to many, many things. And actually, we're still in the very infancy of medical understanding of what the human body is capable of. And I think from that, I'm not saying mistrust or don't trust your medical advisors. I'm just saying maybe see if there's another way as well. Don't just blindly follow what's been told.
Yeah, and I mean, a good friend of mine, he's really into all water and wind sports. He does like wing foiling. So he's got this kind of mini sail that you carry and you're on a foil board and that sort of stuff. So he came to me the other week and he said he used to have bad knees, doesn't have any bad knee problems anymore after I showed him some knee exercises. Shoulder issue. His wife is an orthopedic surgeon, shoulder specialist. Got a scan, he's got a slap tear, so the bicep tendon is sort of frayed and all this sort of stuff. She's like, you need surgery. He's like, Tom, I think I need surgery, but can you have a look at this? So I have a look at, you know, the shoulder and I said, what was the accident? I fell off my board kiteboarding and put my arm down, and so there was a force that kind of pushed the shoulder out the back. Failed his shoulder, felt like it wasn't in place. And anyway, showed him that actually what he was doing now, whatever the injury had done, he was moving just his shoulder, so just the humerus, and the scapula didn't move.
Yeah.
And there's only a certain, back to that thing, like when joints run out of range of motion, it's a sign to pass on the range to the next one. So he was not doing that with the scapula. And so I showed him then some exercises to lift and move his scapula and really drive the movement with his scapula.
Which
Spoke
is
to him yesterday.
Going back to the
2 weeks later.
Yeah.
Hang on a sec. 2 weeks later, he's now back. The things that were bothering him that he couldn't do, so the wing foiling, all that stuff, he's like, I haven't had pain. It keeps getting better. I haven't told my wife yet, but he's like, let's see. So anyway, it's just an example of like, she was like, that is only surgeries that I've not seen it any other way. He's like, hang on. Yeah. And it came down to what kept irritating his shoulder, because he rested it would get fine, but then he'd do something. It was just back to the biomechanics. He wasn't using the joints properly. So,
which is what you see a lot, going back to a basic like a pull-up, is when people don't use the subscap to initiate the movement, then quickly you have the same issue with the bicep tendon. You know, they're not actually having the scapula moving on one side, and quickly they pick up an injury. And they end up doing a pull-up that looks like a reverse bench press. They're in this sort of weird opened out position, and it's just because they're not activating certain stabilizers or certain muscles. And that's why often when I see people doing exercises, to get round a pull-up, they say, oh, well, I just throw a gym band over, for example, and use a gym band to take some of the weight away. It can be good, but just be aware at that point where you initiate the movement, that's the point where you're weak. And you've just put a gym band on that's skipping through that point. And now you're strengthening something on top of nothing, the old foundation thing. You need to train, with just some sub-scat movements, press-ups on the floor with your arms straight, all this type of thing. That's there. The evidence is there. The proof's there that these things work. But the answer nowadays is get an operation or, let somebody do a bit of keyhole surgery. And I agree with you that, you should really invest some time, because that's the other problem, and I've done it in times, give many programs to people who give it 2 minutes and then expect super solutions and answers. It's not as easy as that. It can take 18 months, to get round
Sure,
something.
Yeah. And I should say, disclaimer, I'm like you said, I've got friends and colleagues and clients that have had great success from surgeries, but they'd done some things, found that, no, okay, there was some structural damage there that was just irreversible. Yeah. But if you can get things moving that just weren't moving for whatever reason,
it could be the answer.
It's well worth doing that, and maybe you can delay it or avoid it altogether.
Absolutely. And that's why, nowadays, if people are watching videos of people skiing, and I've seen a lot of comments where people might call somebody skiing inefficient. We were laughing about that the other day when we were talking about, was it Riley? Was it? I can't remember now. One of the two.
Oh yeah, his video.
Yeah, his video.
Yeah.
Sport generally, we might all say we want to be as efficient as possible, but eventually technique breaks down, when you're pushing yourself, and, that's why a slalom race is only so long. Let's face it, it's not double the length of what it is, because the guy gets to the bottom and he's not ready to go again, is he? He's dying, That's sport. Yeah, that's it. That is sport.
Yeah.
There's, you're maximizing the efficiency of the run to be as fast as possible. That's the aim. But I think in these deeper and lower positions, I really want people to get that message of owning those positions off the hill. So that might mean, and a great point you made was boot setup, doing some things on the dry land with your boots. Very few people, I've seen you do it on your videos, and I've thought to myself, there's only going to be a certain core audience who's going to do that. They're idiots, because the whole audience, everybody at the ski instructor level, imagine at the ski instructor level with associations, if we put everybody into their boots in the dry land and make them walk around for 6 weeks when they're doing their course in their boots, they would have a better understanding of their boots than ever before. They'd look weird going for the après at night, but it's such an essential tool, because like you say, you move differently as soon as you put them boots on. Your body naturally reacts like it's in a plaster. Your ankles in a different position.
Yeah, you're operating within that environment, and there's certain reasons, positives, leverage and stuff that boot gives you, but then it takes away other things too, and you need to be aware of that. And you don't want to be fighting your boots. And I was speaking to a guy on the New Zealand team the other day, and he was like, I think that's the biggest misconception ever, is that the best, all the top guys are really pushing on the front of the boot. He's like, I never think that. It is feedback. Where the boot is and the stiffer it is, it reminds me where I should constantly be trying to keep my foot.
Yeah.
And that's why it's good to have it stiff. You get to 100 kilometers an hour and you hit something too soft, you're out of that good position. The boot helps, bring you back there, but you shouldn't be trying to push out of the range of where that boot is.
But that myth, I suppose, is just spread that echo of, it's easy to tell a client, especially at the beginning, just push on the shin, how much, it's a tendency that you hear from all ski instructors, because if somebody's in the back seat and they don't understand fore and aft, which is, let's say, the premise of what we keep preaching is fore and aft. We just constantly harp on about it, to the point of some of the comments on my YouTube channel are horrendous, about fore and aft. Oh, it doesn't exist. It's like, I say, well, how do you walk? If you're not going fore and aft, it's just weird. But But that premise of fore and aft is so important, and again is, you know, generally what goes in one direction rebounds the other way. So the more you're pushing forwards, the more you're going to rebound back anyway. And just having somebody slam forward into the front of the shin is definitely not the answer, you know.
Yeah. And, you know, if you've got really stiff boots, like it forces you to change that pivot point back to the ankle joint we were talking about. Everyone just keeps trying to use the ankle joint as the hinge point. And so in a stiff boot, even if you do that, you'll be forced to move onto the toes. Like you take a ski boot, and what happens if you keep pushing on the shin, you eventually, it rocks up off the heel, like which is what you kind of want to do when you get really far forward. A lot of people are trying to keep the heel down and push the tongue front of the cuff forward. Yeah. And you're just fighting a losing battle there.
Yeah. But again, this is, I suppose, the echo of what we're told, and from ski instructors, obviously, as well. And they mean well. They're just echoes of what they've been told. And there's a certain truth in it, but at the same time, it's all about timing as well. And this is the issue of, I think, people relearning, because let's face it, a lot of the times that you watch an intermediate skier go downhill with maybe 40, 50 weeks skiing, it's often just timing. The fore and aft's there, but it's all sort of mistimed in the turn. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Yeah, the timing of it, like, is everything. You know, I think you'd agree at your level, mostly what you're working on is, damn it, like I was late there. You know, yeah. Well, it's the timing. It's just really difficult, but, you know, skiing feels so much better when the timing, you know, you have a good day of skiing. Yeah. It's usually your timing is on point.